Sheikh Kareem Al-Mansoor believed he had bought perfection with a $3 million dowry. But his bride Aisha Hanura, a woman with a hidden past and a false identity, turned his dream wedding into a blood-soaked nightmare that exposed betrayal, greed, and secrets powerful enough to destroy an empire. Sheikh Kareem Al-Mansoor was known across Dubai as a man who had everything: wealth, power, and a reputation built on control. At 47, he had inherited a real estate empire stretching from Abu Dhabi to London, and his life was surrounded by opulence. Yet, despite all his riches, there was one thing missing: a wife who could uphold his image of perfection. His previous marriages had ended quietly, each one leaving behind whispers of his possessiveness and temper. But Kareem wanted something different now, someone pure, untouched, and young enough to be molded into his vision of loyalty. News of his search for a bride reached Malaysia through wealthy matchmaking circles. Dozens of proposals came forward, but one name stood out: Aisha Hanura, a 24-year-old woman from Kuala Lumpur. She was described as gentle, reserved, and untouched by scandal. Her family, though not wealthy, carried themselves with pride and dignity. When Kareem's representative arrived at their doorstep with an offer that seemed almost impossible to refuse, a $3 million dowry, Aisha's parents saw it as divine destiny. They believed their daughter was being chosen for greatness. The engagement happened swiftly. Within 2 weeks, private jets carried Aisha and her family to Dubai, where she was fitted with diamond jewelry, designer gowns, and a gold-threaded wedding dress valued at over $500,000. The ceremony was set at the luxurious Al Noor Palace Hotel, a venue known for hosting royal events. Gold drapes shimmered under chandeliers, and hundreds of guests from across the Middle East attended. The media called it the wedding of the year, and every photograph showed a radiant Aisha standing beside the powerful sheikh, smiling softly as if she had stepped into a dream, but behind her graceful eyes there was hesitation. Aisha had never met Kareem before the engagement. The brief video calls arranged by his assistants were formal, almost cold. She knew little about his life except what was publicly available: that he was widowed twice and had no children. Yet something about his stare during those calls made her uncomfortable, as if he saw her not as a person, but as a possession. Still, her family's excitement and the promise of wealth silenced her doubts. When the wedding day arrived, Dubai came to a standstill. Rolls-Royce cars lined the palace driveway, and elite guests in white robes and designer gowns filled the hall. Cameras flashed as Aisha entered, her veil shimmering like sunlight on water. Kareem stood waiting, expressionless, in a custom-tailored ivory suit. He took her hand gently, but his grip was firm enough to remind her of who was in control. The marriage was sealed with blessings, and the crowd erupted in applause as fireworks lit up the night sky. After the celebration, Aisha was escorted to the private villa that Kareem had built for her on a secluded island just off the Dubai coast. The villa was more like a palace: marble floors, oceanfront views, and guarded gates that opened only to Kareem's command. Servants bowed as the couple arrived, but Kareem dismissed them immediately, wanting privacy on the most important night of his life. As Aisha stepped inside, she couldn't shake the unease growing inside her. The air felt heavy, too still, too quiet. The luxury around her, the gold ornaments, the velvet curtains, the scent of rose oil, couldn't hide the strange emptiness of the place. Kareem's eyes followed her every move as if measuring her reactions. He had spent millions to marry her, and he expected perfection in return. Outside, the sea wind blew softly through the palm trees, carrying away the last echoes of the wedding music. Inside, Aisha felt the first shiver of dread she couldn't explain. What began as the most celebrated union in Dubai's high society was about to spiral into one of its darkest scandals, a story that would stain the Mansoor legacy forever. The night after the grand wedding felt like another world. The laughter, the flashing cameras, and the music had all vanished, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to cling to the walls of the villa. Aisha sat on the edge of the massive bed, staring at the endless view of the sea through the glass windows. The villa, with its polished marble and expensive chandeliers, felt more like a golden cage than a home. Every surface gleamed, yet there was something lifeless about it. No warmth, no comfort, just cold perfection. Sheikh Kareem had been in his private study since their arrival. Aisha could hear faint footsteps echoing through the long corridors, followed by the sound of a door closing. Hours passed, and she remained seated, her nerves tightening with every tick of the ornate clock on the wall. When Kareem finally appeared, he looked different. The calm, smiling man from the wedding had vanished. His expression was sharp, calculated, his eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. He walked slowly toward her, the silence broken only by the sound of his footsteps against the marble. The servants had been dismissed early, and security guards were stationed outside the main gates, leaving the couple completely alone. Aisha's heart pounded in her chest. She tried to calm herself by focusing on small things: the soft flicker of candlelight, the ocean breeze sneaking through the curtains, the faint scent of jasmine. But it didn't help. Every instinct told her something was wrong. Sometime after midnight, the quiet was shattered by the sound of breaking glass. The villa's lights flickered and a crash echoed through the halls. Neighbors living on nearby islands would later report hearing loud noises, a scream, then the sharp sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Security cameras captured movement inside, but the feed cut out minutes later. By the time guards reached the villa's front doors, they were locked from the inside. For the next few hours, there was only silence. The guards called Kareem's private number repeatedly, but no one answered. When the first light of dawn touched the island, one of the servants, terrified and trembling, finally called the Dubai police. Inspector Rami Saeed was assigned to lead the initial response. His team arrived at the villa just before sunrise, finding the heavy doors still sealed. When they finally broke them open, the air that greeted them was heavy and metallic. The unmistakable scent of blood. The once spotless floors were streaked with dark stains. Broken glass and overturned furniture covered the living area. In the bedroom, they found Sheikh Kareem's body sprawled across the marble floor near the edge of the bed. His chest bore multiple deep wounds, and a shattered wine bottle lay beside him, its jagged edge stained red. His expensive silk robe was torn, and there were bruises on his arms as if he had struggled before collapsing. Aisha was nowhere to be found. Her wedding gown, drenched in blood along the lower hem, was discovered near the bathroom. The jewelry Kareem had gifted her, diamond bangles, a sapphire ring, and a necklace worth thousands, was still neatly placed on the vanity. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence of a third person in the villa. Only 2 wine glasses stood on the table, one half empty, the other untouched. The scene was chilling in its quietness. It was as if time had stopped the moment violence erupted. The investigation team found traces of blood leading from the bedroom to the back door, which had been slightly ajar. Footprints in the sand showed someone had left barefoot, walking toward the shoreline. The tide had already washed away the trail. As the sun rose over the calm blue sea, the villa stood frozen in tragedy. The man who had spent millions to craft a perfect life was dead, and his bride, the woman he believed was pure and innocent, had vanished without a trace. The whispers began almost immediately across Dubai's elite circles. Some claimed she had been kidnapped. Others believed she had snapped under pressure. But there was one thing everyone agreed on. Something unholy had happened on that island. What was meant to be a night of love had turned into a night of blood. Inspector Rami Saeed stood on the marble steps of the Al-Mansoor villa as the morning sun poured over the island, turning the blood-stained walls into a haunting reminder of what had happened hours earlier. Dubai's media had already surrounded the scene, but authorities kept the case heavily guarded. A sheikh's murder was not a simple crime. It was a national scandal that could shake reputations and destroy empires. The official statement released to the press called it an unfortunate domestic tragedy, but behind closed doors, investigators knew it was much darker. As the investigation began, the first thing the police focused on was the missing bride, Aisha Hanura. Every airport, seaport, and private airstrip in Dubai was placed under surveillance. Her face appeared on every security monitor, her passport flagged across international borders. But despite the massive search effort, there was no trace of her. Days passed, and the silence only grew heavier. When Inspector Rami ordered a background check, shocking details began to emerge. Aisha Hanura didn't exist, at least not beyond 2 years. Her documents, including her identification, educational records, and travel history, were fabricated. The woman Sheikh Kareem had married was not who she claimed to be. Her real name was Nur Azleen, born in Johor, Malaysia. She had disappeared 5 years earlier after being connected to the mysterious death of a local businessman named Dato Rahim Azhar. According to police records in Malaysia, Nur had worked as a personal assistant for Rahim, a man known for his influence and predatory behavior. When Rahim was found dead in his home under suspicious circumstances, Nur became the prime suspect. But before authorities could arrest her, she vanished without a trace. Some said she fled to Thailand, others claimed she was killed. No one could confirm what happened, until her name appeared on a marriage certificate in Dubai under the alias Aisha Hanura. Inspector Rami traveled to Kuala Lumpur to meet with local officials and trace her family history. Her parents had passed away, but one relative, her cousin Layla Noor, agreed to speak with investigators. Layla revealed that Noor's life had been filled with fear and secrets. She had always been quiet but carried a shadow in her eyes, a sign of something she never spoke about. Layla explained that Noor had been desperate to start over, to erase her past and find safety. A powerful, wealthy man like Kareem seemed like her only chance. But what Layla revealed next changed the course of the investigation. Noor had contacted her just a week before the wedding. She said she was scared, that she had discovered something about Kareem that made her feel unsafe, something she didn't dare write in detail. That was the last message Layla ever received. When investigators returned to Dubai, they re-examined the evidence from the villa. The security cameras had stopped recording an hour before the murder. The system had been manually disabled from inside the control room. No fingerprints were found on the controls, only smudges consistent with gloves. More strangely, a strand of long dark hair was found on the collar of Kareem's robe, later confirmed to belong to Nur. Then, on the fourth day, the discovery that puzzled everyone came to light. A security guard who had been monitoring the villa's back entrance reported seeing a white-robed figure leaving through the service door around 3:47 a.m., barefoot, walking toward the dock. The footage was blurry but unmistakable. It was the bride. Her face was calm, almost expressionless, and her hands were covered in blood. As the image circulated among the investigators, a chilling theory formed. Nur Azleen hadn't fled in panic. She had walked away with purpose. The woman once described as quiet and submissive had left behind a calculated scene, one that felt more like retribution than fear. But retribution for what? That was the question that haunted Inspector Rami. Behind the glittering world of Dubai's elite, the story of Sheikh Kareem and his mysterious bride began to spread like wildfire. The world saw it as another scandal of wealth gone wrong. But Rami sensed something deeper, a cycle of abuse, betrayal, and revenge hidden beneath the polished surface of a luxury life. He knew that until he found Nur Azleen, the truth would remain buried under layers of lies, blood, and secrets that began long before the wedding night. Days turned into weeks, yet the mystery of the Sheikh's murder showed no sign of resolution. The missing bride, Nur Azleen, had become a ghost, neither dead nor alive, just a name whispered among Dubai's elite. Inspector Rami Saeed, though pressured to close the case, refused to accept the idea that it was simply a crime of passion. Something didn't add up. The more he studied the evidence, the clearer it became that the killing was not spontaneous. It was planned. Every trace, every movement in the villa suggested forethought. While the investigation centered on Nur, another name began surfacing repeatedly: Farid Al-Mansoor, the Sheikh's younger brother. Farid had lived in the shadow of Kareem his entire life. He was charming but reckless, known for gambling, failed investments, and secret affairs. Where Kareem was disciplined and calculating, Farid was impulsive and cunning. He was also next in line to inherit the Al-Mansoor fortune if Kareem were to die without an heir. When investigators dug into Farid's finances, they found multiple offshore accounts, one of which had a series of unusual transactions in the months leading up to the wedding. The most alarming detail was a wire transfer of $500,000 sent to a Malaysian account under the alias A. Hanura. The date of the transfer matched the week Nur had arrived in Dubai. This revelation painted a new picture. Farid and Nur had known each other before the marriage. It didn't take long to trace their first encounter. Records from a luxury hotel in Kuala Lumpur confirmed that Farid had visited Malaysia the previous year under a business pretext. Witnesses recalled him spending several evenings with a young woman who matched Nur's description. Investigators realized what had happened. Farid had orchestrated the introduction between his brother and Nur, presenting it as a chance encounter while secretly manipulating both. He wanted Nur to gain Kareem's trust, to get close enough to destroy him from within. The plan, however, had taken a dark turn. Farid's intention had been humiliation, not murder. He had promised Noor money, protection, and freedom in exchange for playing the role of the perfect bride. But once the marriage became real, Noor must have seen through his motives. She was caught between two powerful men, one who wanted to own her and another who wanted to use her. Somewhere in that chaos, fear transformed into desperation, and desperation turned to violence. When Farid was summoned for questioning, he appeared calm and confident, insisting he knew nothing about the murder. Yet his answers were too smooth, too rehearsed. He denied ever meeting Noor before the wedding and accused the investigators of trying to tarnish his family's name. But Rami noticed something in his eyes, a flicker of guilt that vanished as quickly as it appeared. The breakthrough came when forensic experts examined Farid's car. Despite his claims that it had not been driven on the night of the murder, traces of blood were found on the seat belt and door handle. DNA confirmed it belonged to Noor Azleen. This single detail shifted the entire case. Farid had been near the villa that night. Whether he came to help her escape or to ensure Kareem's death was uncertain, but his involvement could no longer be denied. The more Rami uncovered, the more tangled the story became. It was no longer a simple murder. It was a web of betrayal and greed. Kareem had trusted his brother. Farid had manipulated a vulnerable woman, and Noor, carrying the scars of her past, had been caught in a storm she could no longer control. As rumors spread through Dubai's high society, people began to wonder who the true victim was. Was it the sheikh who paid for love and found betrayal? The bride who sought safety but discovered deceit? Or the brother who had turned blood against blood for power? The truth, Rami realized, was buried beneath too many lies, and somewhere out there Noor Azleen still walked free, carrying secrets that could destroy what was left of the Al-Mansoor dynasty. The desert sun burned relentlessly over the highway when a truck driver spotted a lone figure lying by the roadside near Al-Marmoom, several miles from the city. At first, he thought it was a mannequin discarded by someone, but as he drew closer, he saw the pale skin, cracked lips, and bruised body of a woman barely clinging to life. She was rushed to the nearest hospital under heavy security. When the news reached Inspector Rami Saeed, he immediately left for the scene. The woman's fingerprints confirmed what everyone feared and anticipated. It was Noor Azleen, the missing Malaysian bride. When Rami entered the hospital room, Noor lay unconscious, her body covered in scratches and burns from the desert heat. Her pulse was weak, but she was alive. Her recovery took days, and during that time the authorities struggled with how to proceed. Publicly, she was still the prime suspect in Sheikh Kareem's murder. Privately, there were whispers that she might have been running from someone else. The evidence surrounding the case had grown so complex that even the investigators were unsure who to trust. Farid Al-Mansoor, meanwhile, had gone silent. He avoided public appearances and refused interviews. But before Rami could confront him with the new findings, tragedy struck again. Farid was found dead in his penthouse suite, a gunshot wound to the head, and a note beside him that simply read, "Forgive me." The official ruling was suicide, but the details didn't align. The gun had no fingerprints, and the handwriting in the note didn't match Farid's. It looked staged. Too clean, too convenient. The discovery sent shockwaves through Dubai's upper class. Two brothers dead within weeks, and a foreign bride at the center of it all. Rami, though exhausted, pressed on. He returned to the evidence once more, searching for a pattern. What he found only deepened the mystery. Hidden among Farid's files was a signed agreement between him and a private investigator in Malaysia. The document revealed that Farid had known about Noor's real identity long before introducing her to Kareem. He had used her past as leverage, threatening to expose her if she didn't cooperate with his plan. In return, he promised to erase her criminal record and grant her a new identity. But something had gone wrong. The files also contained several encrypted messages between Farid and a contact believed to be a hired operative. The final message, sent hours before the wedding night, read, "It ends tonight. Make sure it looks like her doing." That was the last recorded communication from Farid's device. Rami realized then that Noor was not the predator. She was the bait. Used by one brother to destroy another, she had been manipulated into a situation with no escape. The night of the murder must have erupted when Kareem discovered the truth, that his wife and brother had once known each other. The confrontation spiraled into violence, ending in blood and panic. Noor, driven by instinct, had fled the villa and vanished into the desert. When she finally regained consciousness in the hospital, she refused to speak. Doctors reported that she stared blankly at the ceiling for hours, responding to no one. The silence became her defense. Without a confession, the police could only rely on evidence, and that evidence was inconclusive. There were traces of her blood and Kareem's on the same surfaces, but no clear proof of who struck first. A week later, she disappeared again. Despite heavy surveillance, Noor managed to slip out of the hospital in the middle of the night. Security footage captured a woman in a black abaya leaving through a maintenance exit, her face covered. The next morning, her bed was empty. She was gone. Again. Months passed and rumors began to swirl. Some claimed she fled to Europe under a new identity, using the money Farid had secretly wired to her. Others believed she never left Dubai, living quietly among the migrant communities under a different name. Inspector Rami filed the final report reluctantly, labeling it a closed case. The official record stated it as a domestic tragedy followed by suicide. But in his private notes, he wrote one final line: "The truth didn't die that night. It walked away." To this day, no one knows where Noor Azleen went or what she carries with her. Some say she was a victim seeking justice. Others believe she was a survivor who turned into her own kind of executioner. Whatever the truth, the legend of the Sheikh's mysterious bride became one of Dubai's darkest tales. A story whispered among those who knew that money could buy almost anything except innocence.